Astounding, frustrated, tragic, some would say sad to describe the Chicago White Sox season. And let's discuss why the season has been incredibly sad with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. Also have covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. So the White Sox officially became the worst team in baseball after tying the 1962 New York Mets loss record, and likely they'll break it tonight at some point this week. Joining me to discuss just how sad it is, along with the dysfunction we have been reading about, and then the team's manager search and where we can find some hope, is from the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, Courtney Finnicum. And Courtney, I love the tweets you've had, but you've especially been putting out recently at Courtney 883. But you put this one out on September 20th. It frustrates me when people think that White Sox don't have a strong fan base. There's so many people in Chicago that have incredible family history with this team, stories, memories, which is why that's happened. Which is why what's happened with this team is incredibly sad. We deserve better. So please describe just how sad the season has become.
You know, I don't know why I'm smiling because there's really nothing to smile about. But I do appreciate you having me on, Todd. But yeah, I have been feeling like a lot of Sox fans, I have been feeling like the weight of this season, with 120 fast, when it was fast approaching 120 losses. And now this week, sure, going to break the all-time loss record. I was just feeling very nostalgic. I come from a long line of diehard White Sox fans. My grandmother used to write literal letters to Bill Melton back in the day. Yeah, she was a diehard fan, and she passed that along to my father, who's also a diehard fan, and then passed it along to me. I've been to 24 home openers in a row. Like, I'm extremely passionate about this team. And to see them literally break the all-time loss record, something that hasn't been done since 1962, is absolutely heartbreaking to a charter franchise, a city that is so sports hungry and so filled with such strong, passionate sports fans, like a city like Chicago. It's appalling, it's sad, it's frustrating, and it almost makes you feel helpless because this is our summer of freedom, our summer of enjoyment. We love baseball, we're baseball people. To have an entire summer wiped out of just unprecedented losing is heartbreaking.
And since it should be nearly impossible to be this bad in this day and age, does that qualify the Sox to be considered the worst team of all time?
100%. I mean, there is nobody when the season comes to an end on Sunday, this record will never be touched again in the modern era of baseball. Never again.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of sad when I have to see some fellow White Sox fans doing mental gymnastics to be like, well, the Spiders were worse, but it's like, well, they had an owner that gave all his best players to his other team. Like, you don't see
Correct.
Jerry sending players to the Bulls. More and more stories are coming out describing the front office dysfunction under Jerry Reinsdorf. What was your initial reaction to the Athletic story and Jake Peavy's comments?
My initial reaction was finally that this is finally all coming to a head. I posted right when the Athletic article came out that this is long overdue. And this is one of the few silver linings to all this losing, is that a lot of the dysfunction that we've all known about, speculated about, talked about, heard about, is finally coming to light. And I really hope that more players, former players, speak out, even current players on different teams. Last year we had Lance Lynn speaking out. We had, Kenyon Middleton speaking out. I want more of that because I feel like this needs to be brought to light. And, we've always speculated about what kind of dysfunction really is going on within that organization because it's obvious, it's obvious. But having firsthand knowledge now of people that have lived it and are currently living it, it's huge. It's the only thing that I feel is a positive of this losing is having articles like this continue to come out. And I hope it continues.
All right, though, if the positive was, say, the Sox could have gotten the number 1 overall pick, would you take that, or do you take this silver lining? Obviously,
You
they
know,
can't get the number 1 pick.
and which is also, that's just an added cherry on top, right? The fact that they're literally going to all this losing and they're still going to pick 10th, it's unbelievable. But I have been burned way too much when it comes to the rebuilds and the prospects. I am very hesitant about what's even going on in Birmingham. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm hesitant to get excited about the future. So to me, it would have helped a little bit with the first round draft pick, but Jerry Reinsdorf being exposed, that's the number one silver lining for me.
And I can't wait till we get to the third segment when we start talking about hope then. But, the fact, though, that this has exposed Jerry Reinsdorf, he is starting to make some changes. So are you confident that the team can at least make the right changes under Chris Getz?
I think that Chris Getz is someone that's in over his head. I feel like we've seen that at the trade deadline with teams with more respected and stronger GMs sort of take advantage of him, certainly with the Dodger Cardinal trade. I feel like Chris Getz was given this role undeservingly. And I do get concerned about the offseason moving forward, who he's going to hire as manager, which I know we'll talk about. I feel like Chris Getz was not the man for this job. And I said it last year on a Baseball Isn't Boring podcast that knowing the White Sox, as much as we were so excited by the Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams firing, that they were just simply going to move up Chris Getz, because I'd heard rumblings about that in the past. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. So to me, I don't have confidence moving forward because this is a guy that should not have gotten at this job to begin with.
Isn't it appropriate, though, that Jake Peavy said basically who runs the team is actually the situation? It always feels like the situation runs the team. I felt that was a very appropriate comment. What did you think when you saw that?
That was a perfect quote. And in fact, we should get t-shirts made because that's exactly what it is. It's the situation. And no matter who's in charge, nobody's really in charge. Who's in charge is the man on top, and that's Jerry Reinsdorf. So everything goes through him. Decisions are made by him. You can have a title of GM all you want, but at the end of the day, you got to answer to that guy. And we know the obstacles there.
Did you ever think that the White Sox would ever be compared to a team that lost that many games in 1916 before America even went into World War One? Like, I have a grandma that wasn't even born before then. Like, did you ever think that you'd find yourself being like, man, the White Sox could also be just as bad as the 1916 Philadelphia A's?
And I laugh because last year I kept saying, how much worse can this be? It's not going to get much worse. I mean, 101 losses, that's unheard of. To me, 101 losses was the bottom, right? That was the bottom. I never thought in a million years we would be on the cusp of breaking the all-time loss record. Never in a million years. And the fact that it's gotten this bad with 6 more games to go, I mean, it is absolutely unacceptable. And a lot of fans are using their humor to get by with this. I myself am doing that. But when there's articles coming out like the Jake Peavy one, the Athletic one, that's the stuff that we got to be sinking our teeth into and really amplifying it. Because I'm not saying that that's going to make a huge change, that all of a sudden Jerry's going to, sell the team in December. But it definitely gives people a shock and gets people to understand, okay, maybe Major League Baseball can step in here and force Jerry to make some real changes. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but more of the stuff that comes out, I like our chances of just having that out there and about people talking about it. That's what we need to be focused on.
All right, I want to get as many perspectives on the team's upcoming manager search, so let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. And whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time and your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And the White Sox start a 3-game home set with the Los Angeles Angels tonight. The first pitch is at 6:40 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode or subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcast, as Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. And I'm here with Baseball's Isn't Boring podcast contributor Courtney Finnicum. And Courtney, where can we find you usually on Baseball Isn't Boring? Where can we find all that stuff?
So I am on YouTube. I am on Apple iTunes. I am on pretty much Baseball Isn't Boring Twitter. You can find me on all the Apple products and podcasts and download accordingly.
I always want to make sure my guests get their payoff, for coming on, for helping me out, because I've had to fill a lot of time for such a god-awful team. So I always appreciate you coming on, appreciate you coming on for the first time. Hopefully you come on much more too. You're one of the best Twitter files in White Sox Twitter world, in my opinion. And that's just me being honest there. So Courtney, before I ask your actual ideal pick, what characteristics are you hoping to see in the White Sox next manager?
Well, to me, the number one thing is no ties whatsoever to the White Sox or the Royals. And I know we joke about the Royals. I know we do, but to me, I need Chris Getz to look outside the box, and I need someone that has legitimate managerial experience. My skin was crawling, and I know people are mixed on this guy and what he brings to the table, but my skin was crawling when I read that Nightingale tweet about AJ Pierzynski. AJ Pierzynski was extremely influential in Chicago. He helped us win the World Series in 2005. He was a giant contributor to that. But the last thing we need is a guy with no managerial experience, no coaching experience even, coming in here and trying to rally up the troops. A guy that really has no experience even in the minors coaching, all of a sudden becoming a manager of this team with all this White Sox baggage. Last thing we need. So to me, number one with a bullet, think outside the box and get different interviews from different teams and organizations that are outside your realm. That needs to happen with a bullet. And to me, a lot of people are talking about how they want these young, energetic managers. I feel like with everything that has gone on with this team this year and last year, we need someone that has legitimate managerial experience. I'm not talking wheeling out Tony La Russa again, certainly.
God, no,
but
please,
I can't even say that name.
Yeah.
But we need someone that's been there and done that and has had the resume to carry out a team that has been losing like this, in my opinion.
Yeah. And actually, I want to get back into the manager, but I want to take a quick time out there to talk about the Royals that you brought up. Can we just stop also thinking that the White Sox are going to be like the Kansas City Royals of this year? Because I don't think they're going to be spending the money, and they don't have a dude like Bobby Witt Jr., right?
Exactly correct. And when people say that, well, look at the Royals this year. That is not going to be the Sox. And you already heard Chris Getz. I mean, he said the quiet part out loud, right? He said, and I quote, "We're not looking to spend big money this offseason." Now, the Royals did that. I actually was on the train of signing Michael Wacha here because I thought he'd be a great fit. Mm-hmm. And the Royals went and got him. And sure enough, he was a great fit. So we are not going to be the Royals of next year. That's not happening. So, and just like you said, there is nobody even close to the talent of Bobby Witt Jr. So that needs to stop as well. I agree with you.
All right, let's just jump back into the manager search. The Reds and the Sox are targeting Skip Schumacher. So when do you think we see him being named the Reds manager? Because the Sox never win a bidding war.
Well, and and I agree with that. I like Skip. I think Skip did a really nice job in Miami last year. I think he was sort of handcuffed with kind of the craziness of that organization this year. But you talk about Miami and the Reds. One guy that I find very intriguing was the man that got fired last night from the Reds, and that's David Bell. So David Bell sort of checks a lot of the boxes for me. 52 years old. So not super old. A guy that's certainly capable and has the resume of being a coach, manager, has had some success. I feel like that's a guy that the Sox should be targeting and talking to. He's a respected baseball guy. He's well liked. I think he's an intriguing name.
Do you think that the Sox are still in the organizational stages and are not doing the properly back channeling that they should be doing right now?
Well, that's always my concern. That's always my concern that either they're not going to do their proper research on any of these hires or any of these interviews, and they're not going to interview enough people. I feel like they may have a target in place. They're going to try to do that. Like maybe it's a Skip Schumacher. And then once Skip Schumacher gets hired by the Reds, they pivot in a totally different direction. That's cheap, easy, and not nearly as qualified as we need this guy to be. So I always get concerned about the due diligence that they do as an organization for these hires and for these signings, even the way they sign players. I don't want to touch on the Clevenger situation too much, but that was malpractice by this organization. It was malpractice. And I know that for a fact. So, they don't do their proper due diligence. And that's always a concern for me.
What do you think of the job Grady Sizemore is doing right now?
I think Grady was a nice boost to this team. I think Pedro Grifol, I do think he's a good guy. I did interview him on Baseball Isn't Boring last year. He gave me close to an hour. He was very upfront, very honest with what he saw with this team, what he wanted to implement. I think Pedro is a good guy. I truly believe that he is someone that didn't realize the depths of this organization and how dysfunctional it truly was. But I think he was someone that sort of stifled the team. And I think Grady, being a former player that played very recently, younger guy, kind of a guy's guy, I feel like that gave this team a much needed boost. I don't think they should go in that direction next year. Again, he does not check the boxes that I think would be a good manager for this team moving forward. But I do think they needed to make a change from Pedro just for optics reasons alone. And I think Grady has been a nice boost for that team. And I feel like they're playing a little bit lighter despite the losing. So I do think he's done a nice job, but he should not be the guy moving forward.
All right, so you already mentioned David Bell. Who are some other people that you'd like to see be the next manager?
Well, honestly, I think Skip Schumacher is an interesting name. A guy that I am keeping my eye on, but I don't think he's ready yet. And again, this would go against my thought process on staying outside the Sox organization, is Sergio Santos down in Birmingham.
No, I honestly think though he would be the one that I would make an exception for of staying
Yep.
within the organization, just because again, he knows a lot of these guys that you're going to be going with, and
Yep.
also he kind of has washed the stink off of himself by going to some other organizations before coming back. So I think that's a very good pick, and I've had Beefloaf on the show, and he's brought that up. So
Sure.
you're not the only one to bring up his name. So I think that would be it. But I don't think they're going to go that direction. I don't even know if they're going to even give him an interview. Honestly, I think they would go with Grady Sizemore before Santos. But do you think like Sizemore is just nothing more than a plan B guy anyway?
I do. I don't think he is. I really do believe that temporary tag was a legit tag. I don't think they have. I mean, Chris Getz was pretty honest about it. He said we are, Grady's our interim moving forward for this year, but we are looking outside the organization. And now the Sox have said that in the past, and that hasn't happened. But I do think that the Sox maybe would have considered Grady if they didn't end up breaking this loss record. I think maybe the Sox could have considered him, but the fact that they are and really nothing has changed that much, I think that they're not gonna move forward with Grady, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't.
All right. Well, let's discuss.
Another guy. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Another
Go
guy that
ahead.
I find interesting, but once again, he goes against the not being a part of the Sox organization. Willie Harris is kind of an interesting.
That's my guy. That's my horse.
I
That's my
love
guy.
Willie.
Yeah.
I love Willie. I think Willie did feel a little bit slighted when he was allegedly interviewed by Reinsdorf before they went forward with Tony La Russa. I think he felt slighted by that, he felt like his interview wasn't taken seriously. And, he's been on the Cubs now for a little bit as, the third base coach, very aggressive third base coach, by the way.
Mhm.
Willie's a smart baseball guy. He's well liked. I love him. I think he would be a fun, comfortable pick for a lot of the fans too. Again, he's part of that 2005 team. So I feel like that would be a guy that I wouldn't despise if they wanted to stay within, the Sox realm. But in a perfect world, I like to see them go out. But Willie Harris and Sergio, those are interesting guys to start paying more attention to.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I want to see them go outside the organization, but at the end of the day, Jerry Reinsdorf is still going to be the one that has to sign off on this. Chris Getz can say he's the decision maker, but it's going to be Jerry's call, and Jerry likes people that he knows. The one thing, again, where I go back to Willie Harris, he's gone to other organizations where he's washed the stink off of him, and especially with the Cubs. And even this year, while it didn't work out really well for the Cubs, he did get to study 1 year under Craig Counsell, and Craig Counsell is one of the things that people forget is he's just very good at pushing the right buttons. You
You're
want to
right.
get a guy
Yes.
that. So you hope that rubs off on him. And he's very in tune to today's baseball player. That's what I really
Yes.
like about Willie Harris. So that's why I threw my hands up in the air and I said, yeah, I mean, that's my guy. That's the guy I want.
And I think it would be a comfortable move for everybody involved. I think there'd be a little bit of pushback from fans like me that are like, oh, he still is connected to the Sox. But to your point, he did, he moved on. He went to the Cubs, spent a year under Craig Counsell, and I agree. He has his finger on the pulse of what is going on in today's baseball world. And I think that's crucial. I do think, again, the next manager needs to be a guy that is not so far removed from what's going on in the baseball world. I don't want some guy coming out of retirement that hasn't been in the game for 10 years. The game has moved way past, what was going on 10 years ago. I do think we need someone that has an idea of analytics, a good, comfortable understanding of that and moving forward in that direction.
All right. Well, let's discuss if there's any hope with this team next on Locked On White Sox. Okay. Weird. Little technical difficulties here. Hold on one second.
Oh,
All right.
I've been there.
All right. This
I've been
episode this episode of Locked On White Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Help root against the Cleveland Guardians and all their success in the AL Central live and in person, and use Booking.com to get a place to stay near the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You and I have suffered through a long season, and maybe you want to watch some good baseball with the Brewers in the playoffs. Take that trip up I-94, book a stay with Booking.com, get a ticket to the game, eat abroad at a tailgate, or better yet, stop at Solomons, get a Solomons burger and a world-famous Bloody Mary. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home teams or rival stadium. No matter what team you are rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city, from hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays. Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, and when you place your first $5 bet. Now, I always maintain FanDuel is outstanding for props, futures, and parlays. FanDuel is good for, your traditional stuff like the over-under and the money line, but the props and the future is where your experience with FanDuel is enhanced. The Guardians' Jose Ramirez is a couple of home runs away from 40-40, and if you put, say, $10 on him joining it at plus 900, that could yield you $90. Say you think the Baltimore Orioles are going to win the World Series, they're at plus 950, so that means $10 yields $95 if you hit. That's FanDuel.com. And the White Sox start a 3-game homeset with the Los Angeles Angels tonight. The first pitch is at 6:40 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am here with Courtney Finnicum of Baseball Isn't Boring, the great podcast there. Again, you can check it out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Got that correct?
You got it.
And she is one of the best Twitter follows because, yes, Twitter is still good. Okay. It may sometimes be a cesspool. Yeah, the guy who owns it can still, but the White Sox Twitter community has been outstanding, don't you think?
It really has. And in all honesty, I agree that it can be a cesspool. It can be difficult. The guy that owns it now is a little bit of a nightmare, but it has done a lot for me. It's done a lot for us. I have found this wonderful community of White Sox fans that are just as passionate as I am. And it's been nice. I mean, it's been nice interacting with people that are in as much pain as I am, so that's been refreshing.
Yes, you'll find that you are not alone. So I asked in the second segment about, can Chris Getz make the right right hires, but are you at least encouraged that he's making the right moves, like by firing people, getting rid of Marco Patti, that type of stuff? Does that at least encourage you a little bit?
It actually does. That Marco Patti firing should have happened a while ago. And the Sox really need an overhaul in the international department. Now, this guy they got from the Mets, I'll be honest, I did a little bit of research on him, not a ton yet. I don't know much about him, but my concern always is, well, if David Stearns of the Mets didn't want him, and why didn't he want him? Do I trust David Stearns or do I trust Chris Getz? That's always my struggle. Like if another organization doesn't want them, but the Sox do, that always makes me nervous. And I hate to be that way because maybe this guy's fantastic, but I always pause. I always hesitate when a guy leaves an organization to come here. Why is that? But I do think him firing, people that should have been fired a long time ago. Certainly, Marco Patti needed to happen. A couple of the other firings needed to happen. I am encouraged by that, but I always pause about who they're bringing in. So, the jury is still out, but it is nice to see that happening at least.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can really point out what's going wrong with the White Sox. I mean, yeah, Chris Getz, even though he kind of sweet talked his way into the job, like anybody could get these guys out of here. Heck, even Pedro Grifol told you what was wrong with the team. He just didn't have a plan to execute it.
Exactly.
Where do you find hope that things could get better, hopefully by the end of the decade? Because that's as far as, that's where I think it might get better.
And, that scares me because none of us are getting any younger. I mean, come on, to have to deal with another, rebuilding team, potentially another 100+ loss season next year, that's very daunting. And it's again, sad, like we discussed. But, I think some of these silver linings that I am seeing from this team and that we've gotten a little bit of a taste of, and I've been pushing for this since July, is sort of this youth movement that's coming up. We saw some hope with Drew Thorpe. Drew Thorpe had some nice outings before, of course, he got hurt. We saw some nice outings with Jonathan Cannon. I think the most recent guy that I've been excited about has been Sean Burke. Sean Burke pitched very well in San Diego on Sunday, and he's had a couple of nice little outings. And that's exciting. It's exciting to see a glimmer of hope from the pitching. And I have been talking about this too. I don't even really want to jinx it because it's been so bad this year. But if you squint at the numbers of the bullpen the past 3 weeks, the bullpen's actually been okay. They're still blowing leads in the late innings, of course, but there's been guys that have been put in place that have actually not done terribly. There's Baroa, who has not been bad. They got rid of Chad Kuhl finally. Anderson's not been bad. So I feel like there's a little bit of hope there. I wish I could have seen more Colson Montgomery this year. I'm a little bit concerned about him. I think Edgar Caro is interesting. I think that entire Birmingham team has some interesting guys on it. And I feel like they're being properly developed by a good coaching staff too, which is nice to see. So I do think some of this youth movement is encouraging. And I did see a stat yesterday, actually, where the Sox are the youngest team in the league. They're the youngest team in the league. So that is encouraging, and it's also scary because there's a lot of development that goes along with that, and the White Sox don't do well with that. So it's encouraging, but it's also nerve-wracking because the guys that are coming in place, that whoever is hired as the next manager, they need to be able to properly develop these guys, and that's always the concern. So cautiously optimistic about some of these young talent that we've already seen come up and contribute has been encouraging.
Yeah, and even if some of these guys aren't stars, I think most of the stars are going to be in the rotation. Can you just
Yeah,
give me some solid baseball players? Because that's the one thing that this team is lacking right now is give me a 2 F4 guy, a
thank
couple
you.
more of those guys, not just Garrett Crochet. Anyways, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow, most likely to discuss the White Sox officially breaking the 62 Mets record, and I want to share your the audience's written thoughts. So please send me your thoughts and feelings on this. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Courtney, thank you again for joining me from Baseball Isn't Boring. And again, where can we find all your great content?
YouTube, Apple iTunes, everywhere you can find podcasts, please download. I have an interview coming up with Terry Francona this week that I'm excited about. So I will look for that and I will be posting it. And feel free to download Baseball Isn't Boring, YouTube, podcast, Apple iTunes.
So really quick, you're going to be interviewing Terry Francona. Are you going to try to hint that, hey, maybe the Sox, they got an opening. You used to be the Double-A manager.
I've already dipped my toe into that with him, and I'm hoping that he can be a little forthcoming with me and sort of talk through it. But yes, I am going to hint towards that. So I'm excited to get that out this week.
Yeah, because he's the dream for me. All right. Well,
He's the dream. Yes.
all right. Well, thank you, Courtney, for joining me again. Have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right.